I've always been an alchemist, transmuting what remains after destruction, creating something new, hopefully infusing the innocence, love, and light that was lost, building with broken shards that make my hands bleed. Loss doesn't just come from death, but from what was supposed to be and never will. That feeling of grief swells, and then the almost unthinkable question hits. What next? Welcome to the Obliterated Place for all the brokenhearted, a space dedicated to creating something from the unrecognizable remnants of loss in its many forms. A place to witness one another's grief and choose to honor grief through our actions, big and small. I'm Kaye Steinsapir. Thanks for joining us today.
Hello, and welcome back to the Obliterated Place. I'm your host, Kaye Steinsapir. Thank you for joining us today. I am here with my guest today, Jason MacKenzie. Hi, Jason.
Hey, Kaye. Nice to be here. It's nice to meet you, sort of in quote face to face after following your work.
Exactly. I feel the same way. We connected on Substack, and I am such a fan of your writing. Were you a writer prior to going through this experience?
Well, I had dabbled a little bit. I wrote a book probably about 10 years ago, but I wouldn't necessarily say I was a writer. Interestingly, I started my Substack maybe 2-3 weeks before my daughter passed away, and so it's just given me a never-ending well of material
right.
to write about.
Yeah, no kidding, right? I think we share, in common processing things through writing and sharing. It gives me meaning, helping to kind of just share my own experiences, and then through this podcast, the experiences of other people who have found themselves in an obliterated place because something happened in their lives that kind of creates this before and after. And, for us, it's the loss of both our daughters, and for you, the loss of your wife earlier. I'm so sorry for everything you've been through.
Thank you.
Yeah. So for our guests who don't know you yet, give us a little background. You're in Canada.
Yeah. So my name is Jason MacKenzie. I'm a husband, father, entrepreneur. So I run a business where with some other buddies of mine, actually, where we coach dads who own businesses on how to be better husbands, better fathers, and better business owners. And then I have part owner of a management consulting company where we go in and help businesses understand how to basically be better bosses. That's probably the simplest way to put it. So those things keep me occupied. And then, like we've been talking about, I do a lot of writing on TikTok, thankfully, just to post. I never scroll there, but I find I'm a much more creative person, I think, than I acknowledged or gave myself credit for when I was younger. And so I like to have some artistic or creative outlets. And I find writing really does that. And to your point, it just feels like it's meaningful to me. It's definitely meaningful to me. And I feel like it can be impactful to other people. So I'm just going to keep doing it until I don't feel like doing it anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I have no idea where this podcast goes, who it reaches. I don't even take the time to look at like any sort of analytics. All I do is trust it goes out to the person who's meant to find it. And I do get, lots of messages from people who relate to a particular guest or story. And I just find that really meaningful. And I feel like Molly, my daughter, who passed when she was 12, 5.5 years ago, I feel like she is sort of part of this process with me and helping the stories we share here to kind of reach the audience that they're intended for.
I think that's one of the aspects, I guess, or things we need to do in order to heal, right? Is to find some way to make meaning. And that's a totally subjective thing. It doesn't have to be big, or on some grand scale, but just some way to not only make sense of loss, but just try to make it mean something to somebody else, I think is, for me, what's very healing.
Definitely. Before I lost Molly, I went through a cancer battle. I had breast cancer. I was diagnosed shortly after my son was born, my youngest son. And in that experience, I had also become someone who needed to find meaning in that. So it wouldn't just be my own terrible situation that happened to me. Like I wanted to connect with others and connect others, who were in kind of similar situations. So I sort of started that process before when I was going through my cancer battle. I was actually on leave, still going through treatment, and it was the pandemic when Molly passed in 2021. So all of those things kind of coincided. And I know you lost your daughter, Chloe, was it 2023?
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us about Chloe.
Yeah, I mean, she was just a remarkable young woman, I would say. I mean, I guess that's pretty much what every parent would say, but
Yeah.
to be honest, like, I mean, very complicated. And she was funny, she was witty, and at the same time, like, I love spending time with her. And at the same time, she had some really serious mental health issues, man, like really serious. And they really intensified as she got older. So she passed away when she was 19. And she, in a way, it was just horrible because it was like, I'd gone through 5 years of watching her mom basically, deteriorate
Right.
to the point of, ending her life. And in a lot of ways, it was like watching Groundhog Day, like, or being trapped in it all over again.
Yeah.
And being unable to stop it. I mean, she was living on her own. She lied and covered up a lot of things. So like everybody that loved her was worried, but I don't really think anybody in her life had a true picture of just how things, how dark things had gotten.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's just a beautiful, charismatic, kind, but just a tortured soul in a lot of ways that she was just never able to heal from her mom's death.
Yeah. How old was she when her mother passed?
So she was 6.
Yeah.
And, it's so interesting because, and I think I don't know what your experience is like. I'm curious actually, but one of the things that I've really just uncovered recently actually was that I have a ton of unresolved guilt about like some of that stuff. And if you had asked me before, maybe like a couple of months ago, my answer was, I'm open to the idea that I've got some guilt that I need to work through, but I don't really think so because I really thought I had like made sense of it. I think as part of going through this journey, it's just realizing the limits of our logical mind,
right?
And how easy it is to rationalize things when something like, for me anyways, guilt, it's stored, it lives in the body and it's got to be faced there. And, so these are all things that I'm learning, but yeah, when she passed away, when Cindy passed away, my wife, I thought after all of those years of just such serious mental health issues, part of me was like relieved, part of me was thinking like, if the kids, at least if it had to happen, maybe it was best that it happened when they were young. Turns out that's actually like literally the worst time for it to happen. But, and then I thought I could love them to healing.
Right.
I'll build a new family and provide them structure and love and, and it'll all end up sunshines and rainbows. And I think a lot of the guilt that I've just realized that I still have is like thinking, how could you have been so stupid, man? Like to think, like to not understand the devastation of like your mother killing herself, and thinking you could like love them to heal. So anyways, these are all things that it's a fascinating, like I'm not saying this in like that it's some kind of like sob story, but oh, poor me, I'm finding out. It's just a fascinating,
it's just your story
voyage of just, and it's just a constant peeling back of the onion,
Yeah, I agree. I don't know any parent who has lost a child who does not grapple with guilt. I recently had Libby Boyce on as a guest. Her son Cameron died of an epileptic seizure, nocturnal seizure, in his sleep, and he was living on his own. Like there was really, she couldn't have been there. There was really nothing, but it doesn't matter the circumstances. I feel like it's so innate in us as parents to protect our children. It's our most important role, in life. And so when they die before us, we feel like we failed them. We feel like we didn't protect them. And I think I really admire the work you do around grieving men and fathers in particular. I think there's a real absence, a void there. But I know my husband, when I read your work, I see a lot of him in your words, and a lot of, certainly as a father, I mean, yes, you definitely struggled with, and, I'm quite sure still does struggle with feelings of guilt that what could we have done differently? You're always going back to the past and saying, if I'd only done this, if I'd only known this, if I had only, one thing could have been different on that particular day, or we just do this to ourselves. And one thing I remind myself of, and I remind my husband John about, it's like, I just know Molly wouldn't want us to do that to ourselves. We're in enough pain as it is. We're in constant pain. We walk around like normal looking people, but we are, our souls are always going to be in pain. And I feel like I walk around like I don't have like limbs, but people can't see it. Like I'm missing an integral part of me, and it's invisible to other people.
Oh God, I think that is it's such an interesting way of putting it, missing a limb, but that other people can't see it. I think that's one of the things that makes, just the loss of a child, but the loss of any devastating loss. I mean, it's a very lonely experience for lots of different reasons. And I think, on the guilt thing, I was thinking as I was listening to you talk is that I think one of the things that we do, right, is we don't like, as human beings, we don't like uncertainty. So we've lost someone, like say a child, for example, and there's no wonderful explanation about, just usually just happens. And what we do is we go back and we manufacture certainty because it's actually less, it causes us less anguish than actually realizing how little we have any type of control or influence over in our lives, because that's very unmooring, especially as a parent. You realize as your kids get older, there's a million variables that impact the trajectory of their lives that you have literally no control over. And so what we do is we try to create some sort of certainty, like, oh, if I had gone back and done X, then Y would have happened. Well, first of all, I mean, obviously you can't go back, but second of all, if you went back and did X, you have no idea what would have happened.
Yeah.
So, so it's just this torture, but it's actually like somehow less torturous than actually just admitting how powerless we really are about an awful lot of stuff that happens in our lives.
And I think that's what makes us scary to some people, right? I feel like when people look at grieving parents, we're kind of like, we embody their worst fears, their worst nightmare of losing their children. And we remind them that it's possible to lose your child, and you can do everything that you know of that you can to keep them safe and protected, and they can still have an accident, they can still have an illness, something can still happen. And I find people they look for like, okay, well, was Molly wearing a helmet? What can I tell myself, like, I'm going to do differently, and so this cannot happen to me? And the truth is, it can happen to anyone at any time for myriad reasons, and we remind them of that reality. And I try to also share with people that in a way that reminds them in not a scary way, but in an empowering way to realize we're all here for such a short time, and that we're all going to the same destination, but we're all here for a short time. And my experiences, both with my own cancer battle and then losing my daughter, have really made me just so aware of how fleeting life is, but also it makes me want to, and it makes me actually do more. Like, it's sort of like I have no fear. I have no concern about anyone else's opinion of what I do. And I'm just kind of going for it. And I really am trying to make my time count, because I know I just don't take for granted that I have a lot of time left.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think that's something we just need to accept if we want to live. I think a peaceful and meaningful life is that the reality is anything can happen to anybody at any time. And that sounds so cliche, but I mean, you're not guaranteed another minute. So otherwise, like first of all, that frees you from the shackles of trying to like obsess about preventing catastrophe. Because I've done this actually. Like I think about how after my wife died, because it wasn't just like her death. I mean, she's a police officer. It was like the 5 years leading up to her death. I mean, we're talking homeless shelters and like rehab and electroshock therapy and psych wards and like all of this stuff.
But Jason,
right? So,
what I'm curious about this, just not to interrupt, but I am interrupting. Like when I read about her, I'm so curious about how she was going through these tremendous struggles and still a police officer.
She was on disability for a good chunk of the last like number of years for sure.
Yeah.
And then she would have these moments of, like the occasional brief like month, let's say, and then she'd go back to work and then she would just not be able to do it. And then she would go off. And, near the end of her life, she really, I think this is one of the things that was not like it was complicated, but like that contributed to her death was, or her sense of hopelessness was just like, I can't go back. I know I can't go back and do that. And,
yeah.
It was such a big part of who she was or how her self-concept, like even trying to wrestle with that on top of everything else she had lost, it was just too much pain to bear. But like, so while she was dealing with her mental health issues, I felt helpless a lot of the time. I mean, basically every day was just determined by her reacting, let's say, to her, whatever her mental health challenges were that day. And then I developed this huge drinking problem as a result of that and drank for 5 years after her death. And I felt completely helpless then too, because I was like, I couldn't stop, and then I look at my kids and, the pain they're in and I can't fix it. And, as a dad, that causes me to feel helpless. And anyway, so to make a long story short, what I did, was to try to cope. After I stopped drinking, I didn't realize this for years, but I became this overachiever to the point of driving myself nuts, where, like I would do all these crazy athletic challenges and like almost kill myself and like set all these targets for myself and take on all these tasks and have all these irons in the fire, and nothing was ever enough. And I remember saying to my wife, like, I'm going to go see a therapist because I did not used to be like this. I'm sure I did not used to be this way. And so anyways, it turned out that it was really a fear of me ever being helpless again, because I'd spent so much time feeling completely powerless, and I was just trying to do all these things, but ultimately it's a fool's errand because nothing's ever enough.
Yeah.
There's always that itch is always going to demand to be scratched unless you can get rid of what's causing the itch in the first place. And then as if to, remind me of how powerless I am, my daughter dies.
Yeah.
So it's like,
yeah.
I mean, I think I've finally learned that lesson now,
right.
Which is,
it's humbling. It's humbling
very
for
much
sure.
So.
I think a lot of people who listen to us will identify with the struggle of loving someone who is struggling with mental health problems, with addiction. So many of us, myself included, are in that position. My mother and my younger sister have both struggled for many years with, that's why I was curious about your wife and how she still managed to function, to some degree as a police officer, but that makes a lot of sense now that you say that. And it's sort of similar with my mother. My mother was a pediatric nurse, and she suffered an injury, a workplace injury, that caused her discs in her back to rupture. And when she had surgery, that surgery went poorly and caused further damage, and she couldn't work as a nurse anymore. And maybe somewhat similar to your wife, your late wife, that was like her calling in life, and she could not do that anymore. And she she had struggles prior to that, but after that they became worse, and definitely we reached a point, and we are now at a point where it's like similar to what you described. It's like if and when we get that call that she's passed, I mean, in some way, and I feel terrible even voicing this, it will be a relief because she is so ill. She has a place where she's living now, but she's been living on the streets for many years on and off. And she's just so unrecognizable to anything, like she was before, and so ill. And we've done everything we can, everything anyone possibly could to help. We bought her a place to live. She didn't live in it. Other than just giving her cash, which is what she would like and what I'm not willing to do. I have done everything humanly possible to help, and just nothing works. And my younger sister also really battles with drug addiction. So it's just, I think so many of us are in this position of watching our loved ones slowly harm themselves in different ways. And we feel helpless, and we don't know what else we can do. And at some point you reach a point where there really is absolutely nothing more you can do. And it's just this horrible feeling of just watching them destroy themselves.
On one hand, when I found out Cindy had killed herself, the first thing I felt was relief. Like relief that like her pain was over.
Yeah.
I mean, God, like she had suffered. I mean, I say this all the time, but if I had gone through, like I've never been angry at her for killing herself, because honest to God, I don't know if I would have made it as long as she did. Like seeing what she went through, the pain was just, it was like inconsolable mental anguish. And she did all the stuff that that they told her to do. And it's just none of it worked. And, and so I guess there's always, nothing's ever like totally black and white or whatever. So like on one hand, I felt relief, and then I felt guilt for feeling relief and all that. But, I mean, I don't know what it would have been like to watch her, if she didn't kill herself, to watch I don't know where like I could have easily seen her ending up on the street.
Right.
For sure.
Did she have a diagnosis?
Well, she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, but honestly, I mean, I think she was having just emotional dysregulation, like extreme emotional dysregulation from unresolved trauma and invalidating experiences. I mean, from sexual abuse as a kid to like all that, like she dealt with eating disorders when she was younger. So I think I don't know. I'm not definitely not a mental health practitioner, but right. I tend to think we pathologize things. We tend to err on the side of pathologizing. So I don't really know, but I just know that she had a ton of unresolved trauma. And
same. I don't know. My mother's never been willing to see anybody about it, so she has no diagnosis either. But and I mean, at some level, I guess it doesn't really even matter, right? But except for that, if they were willing, they could get treatment for it. That has never been the case, for anybody in my family. So. Yeah, I just think it's very prevalent, and we all struggle with this on some level. Just this pain of loving someone who is unreachable to a certain degree, who's not the person we remember. I love something you wrote about Cindy and Chloe, about how you recognize like they loved you the best that they could. And that was a reminder I needed, because sometimes, especially because it's my mother, right? It's like, and she's never been able to be there for me. When I had cancer, when I lost my daughter, she's not there. In fact, she's the opposite. She's like causing more distress and more problems. And so there's obvious, anger about that or whatever. And it's good to sometimes remind yourself, like, they love you the best that they can, that they're capable of, and they're not capable of more. They can't give you more. They can't give you something different. They can't give you what you want and need. But they are offering you something. It is there. Like, there is love there. It's imperfect. And, like, acceptance of that is somewhat a consolation.
Well, yeah, so I heard that idea. I was taking a number of years ago, I was taking like a training program this is kind of a mouthful, but a training program to lead peer support groups for family members supporting people with like borderline personality disorder. So it was a family members group. And we were learning some different things. And one of the ideas was kind of like exactly that, which is people are doing the best they can in the moment. And if they could be doing better, they would. And all that really means is that it's a compassionate way to look at people, but it doesn't mean that you don't have boundaries. It doesn't mean that their actions don't have consequences or any of those things. It just means that, if I have to deal with this person, I have ultimately one of the few things that is in my control is how I choose to look at them, and so you could say, like, and I'm sure you've gone through all over the map on this, but you could say like you failed me as a mother and all this, which is ultimately probably true, but at the end of the day, who does it benefit by hanging on to looking at it that way? Like it just causes more harm than is already happening,
Yeah.
And so I think if you can get, like, we can get ourselves there. So like with Cindy, for example, like, there's a lot of infidelity. I found a lot about it afterwards. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, afterwards, and I'm thinking to myself, we were together for 16 years and this is not what I thought it was, like in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I'm like, first of all, there's this, like, a lot of soul searching was to say, am I like a complete idiot? Like, can I trust my judgment,
right,
like with anybody ever again?
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, and so there was that, and then with Chloe, like, it's a similar thing in the sense that, she just lied about so many different things. And I understand why. Like because, and so just to kind of back up, like, being a great dad, like, it is the most important thing in the world to me. It's what I do for, like, my work,
right.
And so I try to create, all the conditions where, like, if she in a kind of relationship with her where, if she ever felt like her world was falling apart, she could come to me.
Right.
But I also understand why she didn't, because she had made so many choices that were harmful to herself or others. She had lied about so many things, like, to come and say, like, and I was probably near the end, one of the few people, like very few people who she knew loved her unconditionally. Like, so, her self-esteem was, it's just, she was in a pretty dark place. And so to risk, coming to the one person and saying, like, Dad, and, like, basically saying, here's all the things that are going on, and risk even though I told her a million times, like, I would always love her no matter what, but regardless, she's 19 years old, like, to risk that, like, she's not going to do that. I could see why. I understand why she didn't do it. So, but when I found out that she, lied to me about all these things, it was the same thing. I'm like, God, how well did I even know my own daughter? And so I think to kind of come to terms with that, I just, they love me the best they could. It's really that simple. And because I know they both love me. And that might sound strange, talking about my first wife, but I know she loved me. Like, I'm not this, like, naive person, but it's all to try to love another person, like, to, as fully as possible when you are battling these freaking demons that you are just trying to make go away. Like, I mean, it's obviously that's going to impact on your capacity to love another person. Yeah. I mean, so I don't know. That's just how I choose to look at it.
I can't imagine, and now I'm being an annoying person that says I can't imagine, because I hate it when people say that to me, but what must it have been like for you to suddenly be on your own with Chloe and her younger sister? How old was she at the time?
So she was 5. And, so it was interesting because I was basically a single dad. Like, we had actually separated shortly before she died, and it was super complicated. She basically threw me out of the house in a manic rage, and the kid, so the kids were almost always with me. So I was like, it was such a painful experience because I still like I cared about her so much, and I knew that I just couldn't imagine that this was gonna. I didn't think she was gonna kill herself, but I just didn't couldn't imagine it ending well in some way. And so, I just I tried to do the best I could to support her. I mean, God, I was still paying for everything. My thought process was like, oh my God, like I am going so far in debt here. But my thought process was, I mean, of the two of us, like I'm probably have a better capacity to dig myself out of this somehow. So like, I'll just keep doing this as long as I can. But anyways, I was basically a single dad, so, yeah, I mean, it's, I did everything that needed to be done and to the best of my ability. But at the same time, like girls need a mom. Yeah. Like, I mean, and so, and they knew that their mom, like they knew there was something. I never said any kind of disparaging word about her mom ever, but they were getting old enough to tell, like things are weird when we go over there. Like, she gets mad a lot and she, like just stuff like stuff like that. Yeah. And so, but I mean, and I used to tell myself that if she was never going to be able to get her shit together, basically, like maybe it was better this way, because, but I don't believe that at all, actually, because all that really happened was she transferred her pain onto them, without realizing it. Like, right. I mean, when someone's in that dark a place, like obviously she had convinced herself that she was a failure and everybody'd be better off with her. I understand why she thought that. Like, I mean, and so, but yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like the thing that she was actually the opposite of what she was trying to do, it's like, I'm going to free everyone so they'll all be better off without me. But all she did was really take what her pain and transfer it to the kids. And I think, and I'll stop the monologue here in a second, but like, when before Chloe died, I was in a good place with Cindy's death. I'm remarried. I've been remarried for quite a while now. And, I didn't even, like, I'd go visit her grave and every once in a while I would get emotional, but I really didn't think about it that much anymore. And it had been like 13 years. And, but the thing with Chloe's death is that Cindy's suicide, like, basically set off the chain of events that led to, like, they were so tightly related to each other that it like kind of like dragged Cindy's death from the past and like brought it right back in the present somehow. And
it makes perfect sense to me. Yeah. That it would, right?
Yeah. So then, it's like, just makes it even more sort of more complicated. I'm curious. So, 5.5 years later, like, how would you describe where you are now as far as your healing journey?
Let's say? I mean, I would not say that it is easier, that it's less painful, because it's not, or that I'm thinking about Molly any less. I'm always thinking about her, and I'm always longing for her, and I'm just under the surface. I'm broken, but I don't break down and cry as much as I used to. Like in the first year, at least for me, it's like I never knew it was possible to cry that many tears, that was like humanly possible. And I couldn't go anywhere without, and it would happen sometimes really unexpectedly, driving or in the grocery store or in an airport or something, like where I would just become overwhelmed with grief, and like a tsunami of grief would hit, and I would just find myself like flattened. And that would happen to me more unexpectedly and more like the violent waves, And it was very difficult because my boys, were 10 and 4, and I needed to be strong for them. They had just lost their sister, very suddenly, and they were, in need of their mother. And I remember for a long time after Molly died, when I would get into bed at night, I would just wail. I would sob uncontrollably. And my husband, John, was like, I can't can't take it anymore. Like, I can't. This is so. Obviously, he felt like helpless watching me just express this overwhelming, deep, guttural pain of a mother who can't reach her daughter, who can't reach her child while going through his own. So that whole scene, like what that was like for us early on, that's not our reality anymore. We're not doing that, that raw sort of overwhelming expressions of grief, but the grief is still the same. It's just that it does become, you become, I think, more capable of carrying it and living with it. And I knew that I just did not have the option to like just fall apart and stop living because I had my little boys. If I didn't have them, honestly, I don't know. It would have been very different. I really would have struggled, I think, with like wanting to stay alive. I mean, because I felt like that anyway. Not that I was ever like seriously contemplating acting on those feelings at all, but like you have, most people I know who've lost a child, we have the feeling of we just want to be with them. We just want to go where they are. We want to be reunited with them. Like, we're longing for them so deeply that, of course, we can't help but think like, I'd rather just be dead than live like this, than live with this. It's sort of like what you described with Cindy, living with this anguish that like never, it never leaves you. You're just constantly in pain, and it's a very difficult way to go through life. But I knew it just was not an option for me to fall apart. And I also had been a child of a woman who had fallen apart. And I know what that's like. And I was not about to do that. So I dug deep and, just kept going. And and it's still what I'm doing. It's like, okay, I went from I'm getting through this minute to the next to prolonging that. Like, now I'm getting from an hour to the next hour. And now I'm kind of like day to day that, I feel like I can manage these bigger chunks of time. I think like you, I have found some solace in faith. I need to believe that there's something bigger than us and that Molly's present spiritually and that we'll see each other again. And I've turned to that as a source of comfort. I think sometimes in these situations you can turn away from faith or turn towards. And we decided to turn towards. And it's not like we're, extremely religious or going to services a lot or anything. But, my husband did go to services every day for a year after Molly died. We're Jewish, and in our faith, that's something that you do. And these organized sort of rituals and coming together with some community, because you have to be together in a group, was kind of a lifeline.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, it's just so much you said there that that resonates with me. But I think one thing that it sounds like, you and your husband have come through this or are coming through this or on this journey together. And I think, for me, like that's one of the I've written about this, but I think it's one of the most impactful moments was. My wife and I were fortunate, to have a really good marriage beforehand. I mean, I've been kind of in that business. I take that pretty seriously. And, but when after Chloe died, we were driving up to pick up her sister because she was like 4 hours away. I wanted to get up to where she was before she found out on social media or whatever. So, but anyways, it's awful. But my wife turned to me and just said, we got to commit to each other right now. Like this is the kind of thing that destroys relationships. So we got to commit to each other right now that we're only going to get stronger through this. And we have, and I'm sure we will continue to. But I mean, it has been an incredible amount of work. I mean, she is, for us, it was very, very different because she was not their biological mom. However, she poured, and that I think that's actually less important, but like in the sense she poured her heart and soul into raising these kids. But she also had a very complicated relationship with Chloe, and in the sense that Chloe just I think that my wife is just a constant reminder to Chloe that her real mom is dead, and so she was never able to receive love from my wife, and just that kind of stuff. And so and then we found out after Chloe died that she had just said the craziest things about my wife, like, and so I was saying to my wife, like, if the situation was reversed, I don't really know how much I'd be grieving someone that hated my guts, man. You know what I mean? Like, honestly, I really don't know. Like, and so, and obviously she is, and, it's complicated, and, it's like, there's also the what might have been and all of that. So it's, and I'm in no way diminishing her experience at all. And at the same time, it's definitely been more intense, I think, for me. Like, and she's been just incredibly compassionate and understanding, and also challenging. Like I had a period of time after probably a few months after Chloe died. I think it was about 4 months, and I hadn't I haven't drank for it'll be 12 years, and I hadn't smoked any pot for a couple of years, and I was a bit sober, and but after Chloe died, I think it was about 4 months, and I just could not take it. I could not take it anymore. And so I went and bought a couple joints, and basically spent the next 4 months just stoned every night.
Yeah.
And, she was also very challenging in a loving way.
Right.
But like saying, this is not working for you,
right.
man. Like it's, and just, so just been super supportive. But, to your point, I think like one thing is really hard about the journey is that it changes you, and you in some really profound ways. And like part of, I think, navigating is figuring out, are these changes permanent, or is this just some temporary thing? And like, I would really hope that some of them are temporary. Like for example, we went to this weekend. So in Ontario, they just started doing like a Ontario Police Suicide Memorial. So they're really doing a lot as far as, because it used to be such a taboo thing in policing. And so, this weekend we went to Toronto, and I'm part of the organizing committee for this thing. And so, it's really a weekend of spent, with families of officers who had killed themselves, etc. And, then there was a ceremony. Make a long story short, I came home on Sunday, and yesterday I basically had to lock myself in the basement in the dark, like to turn it into some kind of sensory deprivation chamber, because I'm like, I am done, man. And like that never would have happened to me, that kind of thing, like before Chloe died. That was not even I wouldn't have even thought about it. What the next day I would have just gotten, would have got jazzed, but now like I'm just so much more aware of like what my body is actually telling me, but it's almost like I have to listen to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's been 3 years.
I think it does change us. Obviously it does. And for me, I know a lot of it is permanent. Probably most of it is permanent, except for, as I said, like, I do have a greater ability to like function in the world, and not completely fall apart. And in some ways, I mean, I guess, what they call post-traumatic growth, I have definitely experienced that too. And that because Molly only got 12 years, I feel driven to do some of the things that she would have done had she lived longer. She was an extraordinarily compassionate, giving, kind girl. And I see the world differently because of her, because she had such an awareness of everyone and everything, like we'd pass somebody that's unhoused, and she would stop and see every person and want to help everyone. And the same with animals, she just had such a great sense of empathy and awareness and compassion, and also drive to do something. And I feel a really strong pull to try and make the world a little bit better in her stead, and doing some of the things that she would have done if she had lived longer. And that to me feels like a mission that's worthy of like giving my, all. And I'm someone who, I'm a perfectionist. I'm somebody who works really hard. I pulled myself up from the bootstraps, like after a really difficult upbringing, and, managed to get myself into college and law school and, create a good life for myself because I'm someone who gives my all to things. And so naturally in this situation, I'm giving my all to this. And I think Molly is also, part of the process. And so together we're making good things happen. And that to me is finding meaning. That's having a meaningful life, despite enormous suffering. And one thing I really admire about your work is you're putting out content, through your videos and through your writings that's so relatable because, you're coming from a place of like, I'm in the struggle here. Like I struggled with alcoholism, and then my wife pointed out to me I was, using pot to numb my grief and not feel this horrible pain. And, you're going through it all. And from that place of like, look, I'm going through these struggles, you're also inviting others in to see what it's like for you. And it's just so relatable. And I, as somebody who, as a lawyer, I'm trained to write in a very succinct way. Like words, kind of all have to be doing something. And I admire your writing so much because it's so easily digestible. And I think for people who are grieving, it's essential, right? Because like our brains just we can't compute, there's so many things. I hear it all the time from grieving parents or others who have lost someone. It's like, we don't have the same faculties, we don't have the same ability to focus and take in information and absorb. And so it almost needs to be like the way that you're communicating. It's just so easily received. And I think that's such a gift.
I appreciate that. It's funny because so the reason I write like that, I mean, there's a couple of reasons. One is I think, on the relatability side, I think that like in my particular situation, like when Cindy died, my first wife, I mean, I was just like a normal guy, man. Like I thought grief was for weak people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I just like the world keeps turning. You got kids to raise, a new life to build. That chapter is behind me. Like, let's get on with life. And I literally thought that was possible. I mean, it's a pretty normal, like, I think it's a pretty normal guy reaction anyways. And I drank myself silly without ever realizing that the two things were related till after I stopped. I say that now and I look back and I'm like, wow, that's wild, man. But because in my mind, I'd put that behind me. So I've gone through grief that way, and now I've, in the process, like that sent my life down a very different path. And so now, with Chloe, I'm just a different version of me going through another horrible experience. But like, I think what's relatable is I get the people who are stuck, man. I get it. Like I feel that. I have so much empathy. I understand the mindset, and I just try to write to those people on the way that I write. So when I wrote a book about fatherhood, like in 2016. And so I sent the first chapter to the editor. I had total imposter syndrome about this thing. And so my thought process was, well, I'm going to establish credibility by sounding really freaking smart. So, I used I busted out every word in my vocabulary and probably, had the thesaurus beside me at all times. But so I wrote the first chapter, every adverbs all over the place, it was a disaster. And so anyways, I sent it to the editor, and her response, I will remember this for the rest of my life. In the subject line was all in capitals, "This is shit." and I was like, it was like, I mean, I already had imposter syndrome. I was like, oh my God, who was I to ever think I could do this? But anyway, she said, basically, you got it. Like, nobody talks like this, And so basically what I learned from that, and I've actually, I don't know, I feel like it's like almost like a art form in some ways, but it's like, how can I communicate like ideas that are important to me, that I think are significant, in the fewest, simplest words possible? Because when I write, I always think of, I want, maybe this gets, is in a book, or I don't know, it's in some place where like a truck driver who has literally never given any of this shit a second's thought could come in and pick it up and be like, man, I get what this guy's saying.
Yeah.
Like, so that's what I always try to,
and it
like,
works. It works.
Yeah.
I like that. I admire that. I had a similar experience as a young lawyer when I first started, turning in my briefs to my supervising attorneys and getting back all this red ink and basically this is shit. And it was like, look, this needs to be able to be like spoon-fed to a judge, a busy judge who doesn't have time, who's not going to, spend time reading all your flowery language. Like, it's got to be just like injected into my veins. Like, I got to just be able to absorb it. And so I developed a writing style that I really try to make my words all do something. Like, if they're not necessary, I'm cutting them. Like, I write in a very sort of succinct, clean way, and I think you do as well. And just so happens we find ourselves as grieving parents, and I think that writing style happens to work best for people who are in that situation, because it's just, we're like we have limited ability to focus, to read, to just do anything, because I feel like it's just like grief is like this thing that is just always draining your battery. It's always there in the background, just draining down your battery. And so sometimes I feel like, God, I come home after, I pick up my son from school and I just collapse into bed and I'm like, what am I doing? Like I shouldn't be doing this. Like, I got stuff to do. Why am I so tired? But it's just a lot to kind of be out in the world doing all of these things. And as you said, it is more, I feel like it because of the people we become as a result of these experiences, interacting with other people, we're just a lot more in tune to what's going on with people and their energy and all of that. Like, we just, at least for me, it's like I take it in so much more now, and I'm so much more aware of other people's suffering. And I look at people and I'm like, God, what is this person going through? What's their situation? What are they carrying that I can't see? I just wasn't like that before. I just not for any, bad reason. I just was a person who was like very focused on like doing what I needed to do to get to where I was going. Like, I was trying to get out of this crazy life that I was living, with my family that I was born into, and like just going from one thing to the next. And I just wasn't as aware of all the other people and all their stuff and all their stories. And that's one thing I really like about the podcast is like, I just like being able to share stories. Like, I'm not trying to offer any particular wisdom. I'm not like a therapist. I'm not a life coach. Like, I'm just interested in storytelling. And I really think that other people find strength and healing to some degree when they can see themselves reflected in other people. And they're not offering any particular advice or wisdom or anything. It's just like, okay, I can see Jason, and I'm also a man who's drinking because I'm battling pain that like I just don't know what to do with. And I think every single person, I think to some degree, when you're in this kind of pain that we've suffered, you fill that void somehow with something, and it's not always going to be something good, right? I mean, it's like we try to, do exercise, we try to do meditation, all these things, but somehow, some way, people are numbing themselves with alcohol, drugs, food, sex, shopping. In my case, like it's like all kinds of things. we are filling that void with something. And so I just think the mere fact that you are talking about it in such an open way and not sugarcoating anything and just being like, look, this is what I did, this is what I've experienced. And that in and of itself is such a gift to other people.
I also always consistently question my own motivations for even doing any of this stuff, right? Like, because, on one hand, you get obviously it's great to help people. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, you get validation from people.
Yeah.
I wonder, and but also, so I question how much that plays a part in why I want to do this. But I also am constantly questioning myself about is this actually helping me move forward doing this? Will I know if that, I do feel like it is now, and I feel like it's something I want to continue to do, but how will I know if that, if it stops serving me in the way that it is right now? So I don't know. I'm always asking myself, not always, but I mean, I do fairly consistently just reflect and talk to my wife about it, because I think that doing it for, I want to be doing it for the reasons that make sense for me, and when you're grieving, sometimes those things can get kind of messy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And it's something I think about as well. And my husband and I have very different approaches to grief. He's very private and I'm more public. And just recently we were so happy to learn that through my network, someone just recently received a kidney because of something that I shared, a story that someone needed a kidney transplant. And I didn't know that
Amazing.
Family. And someone who follows me because of Molly and who's inspired by Molly gave her kidney to this gentleman, So I felt like that was sort of a good reminder for me. And my husband said the same. It's okay, you're on the right path, that's so life affirming, Five and a half years after Molly died, she's helping to save someone's life, But yeah, I've had to question that as well. What am I doing with this? Why do I care? Why do I want to put this out there? And why do I want my family to be out there? My son was just on the podcast, and I did, I told him no a bunch of times. No, I don't think you should come on. I don't, I don't want to, I don't know. Being the public eye is not easy. It's often very ugly. Yeah. But he really wanted to, and it actually was very beautiful. And people really, enjoyed that, everything that, we shared there. So I like kind of being able to offer different ages, different everything here, it's just what happens to us in life, it's we all go through such struggles, and it's the human experience. And so I'm just here to share stories like yours and like Eli's, and I genuinely believe that they find the person that they are meant to find. And that I think that, maybe I'm woo-woo, but I think our daughters helped to bring us together. I loved reading about Chloe. I loved reading about how your wife bought an Easter basket for your daughter, even though she's 21. I thought that was so sweet. And it was a good reminder for me that my older son, who's going to be 16, it's no matter how old they get, it's they still want those things. They still need those little moments and gestures and things. So I think, as somebody who has benefited from the things that you're sharing, and you've helped me to kind of have a better window into my husband's grief process, maybe I can be the reminder for you that I think you're on the right path as well. You're definitely creating really impactful work. And I'm so inspired by sort of ripple effects, that sometimes we don't even know about, right? It's that by being vulnerable, by being open, by allowing other people to see the unvarnished versions of ourselves in this, indescribable pain of losing our daughters, that has ripple effects that many times, we may not even know about. So I appreciate you. I appreciate what you're doing. I just want to encourage all of our audience to follow you on Substack. What's the name of your Substack?
It's called Man Down, and the URL is just mandown.tools.
Okay. We'll put it in the show notes. Definitely. Anything else you want to share?
No, just really appreciate the opportunity to meet you and to get to know you a little bit. And thank you for the work that you do. You were one of the first people I kind of came across when I joined Substack, actually. So, yeah.
All right.
I enjoyed it.
It was great meeting you. Thank you so much for coming on.
All right. Take care.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of The Obliterated Place. I'm your host, Kaye Steinsapir. If you are watching on YouTube, please make sure to subscribe and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much for joining us. And thanks to our guest, Jason MacKenzie.